Welcome to History Bites. My name is Val Harrison. I'm the Supervisor of Visitor Experiences at Guelph Museums. History Bites is a 1-hour-long casual conversation during which we chat about the latest news, exhibits, and other happenings at Guelph Museums. History Bite airs on Guelph Museum's Facebook Live every month. A recording of today's program will be available through the Museum Everywhere portal, on our website, and on our socials after the broadcast. We are recording today's program at McCrae House in Guelph, Ontario, the birthplace of Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, soldier, doctor, explorer, and artist, and author of the famous First World War poem In Flanders Fields. This year marks the 150th anniversary of the birth of John McCrae in this house. Before I introduce and welcome our guests, I'd like to focus our thoughts within the awareness and acknowledgement of the land. Guelph is located on the ancestral homeland of the Anishinaabe people, specifically the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. Guelph today is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Guelph Museums commits to the Truth and Reconciliations Commission call to action and to do more to learn, share, and support truth and healing. When we gather, we spend time in conversation about the land, its history, and its people. We grow our knowledge and our relationship with our treaty partners, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, and with many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people who call Guelph home. This informs all that we do at the museum and underscores our commitment to each other today and for the health and well-being of future generations. Now today, I am so excited to speak with McCrae experts and longtime friends and colleagues, Dietrich and Linda Granfield. And I'm looking forward to chatting with them about McCrae myths they have corrected and recent discoveries in their ongoing research into their McCrae's life and times. I'm going to be pouring tea too. We're going to have tea at McCrae House, which is just suiting for our conversation today.
It really is.
Welcome, welcome. And I'm going to do a little bit of a bio on you. You have done amazing things in your past, and the future looks great too for the types of work that you're doing. So Bev, my friend, Bev has been involved in the museum field for more than 35 years. She is the former curator of Guelph Museums, hence how well we know each other, and and having retired in 2017 after working 25 years at the museum. Bev graduated from Wilfrid Laurier University with a BA in History and attended the Museum Technology program at Algonquin College in Nepean, Ontario. She is a graduate of the Ontario Museum Association Certificate in Museum Studies program and was a course director for the Collections Management course for over 15 years. Bev has recently returned from Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, sharing her John McCrae expertise with travelers of the McCrae 150 Memorial Tour organized by Guelph Museums. A fabulous tour it was. Now, Linda Granfield is a historian and has been investigating and writing about John McCrae and his world since 1994. So we all go back that far when we first met. So that's pretty amazing.
Past.
Yeah, truly. She is the award-winning author of more than 30 history books for adults and young readers. Linda spent the pandemic years collecting materials for a forthcoming McCrae omnibus. Looking forward to that. She holds a degree from Salem State University, Northeastern University, and the University of Toronto. Many of her books deal with war and remembrance, and she has been a consultant on various documentaries and feature films about the First World War. Granfield has also provided historical notes, interviews for television and radio programs, managed media sites for First World War subjects, and has written articles for first-time finds for historical journals. Her books, In Flanders Fields, the story of the poem of John McCrae, is now introducing a third generation, I remember the first,
yes.
Of young Canadian readers to John McCrae and his First World War poem. So pleased that I could bring you both together here at McCrae House to chat about Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. So I think let's just dive in. But I will pour tea so that we can talk too. So I'm going to start off with, it fascinates me and I'm so impressed, and you guys are my idols, so that after so many years of researching McCrae and so many years, that you still have this huge fascination. And what is it that keeps you interested and motivated? And where does that still come from? Who wants to start? Bev, what do you think? What keeps you going?
Well, I think what keeps me going is that having worked here at the museum for 25 years and doing research and exhibits on McCrae, I just have so much knowledge in my head, and I wanted to make sure that that knowledge is passed down. And so the project of transcribing his letters came up, and I just thought, what a perfect opportunity to be able to do a win-win situation where I can use my knowledge that I have of McCrae and then be able to cross-reference it and create footnotes with these letters that cross-reference to things in the collection here, objects that are somewhere else, and then the whole process, because everything now is slowly becoming digitized and online. We're finding more and more things online that's really helping with the research, and it's fascinating.
So one question leads to another, opens up another journal, opens up another letter.
I call it the research rabbit hole.
which is a fine rabbit hole to dive down.
The problem with the internet, of course, is as much as you find that's correct, it also shows incorrectly a lot of material, and then that gets picked up and carried through on 100 other sites, and you feel like you're just like swim as fast as you can, because as soon as you correct one thing, and it's at the point you cannot go on and on every site that has an error and say, excuse me, would you please fix that? It's like, that's not going to work. So I got into it by starting on that research for that book when we all first met, that first edition of In Flanders Fields. By the way, when that came out, my daughter was quite young, and one day someone called the house and asked for me. It was before internet. And my daughter said, well, can I take your name? I'll pass it on to my mom. And while she's writing it down, the woman said, I never knew a woman wrote In Flanders Fields. And it was just because of the book title being In Flanders Fields, the story and the poem by John McCrae, but this woman obviously, so it's funny, like, okay, so how does that, right there was a nugget for someone to walk away and start talking about, did you know that a woman wrote In Flanders Fields? And it'd be like, oh no, we have to correct that. But that digging, so the digging for me started coming up here because I couldn't believe there wasn't a book already about the poem. And, as an immigrant, I've been here 50 years, but, I grew up learning In Flanders Fields, but you never think like, who wrote it? We're always citing it, who wrote it? And then there's no book, there's nothing at the library. And then I said, where do I go to research? Well, I found the ideal spot coming here to the Guelph McCrae House Museum, because then I was up in the upstairs with Bev showing me all the archives. Hey, we have our cup of tea. We should be like...
Okay, cheers to that.
Cheers
to years of...
McCrae.
Yes. I'll drink to that.
Yes, and wonder which room was he born in.
So the quest was on then.
The quest was on, and I'm a curious digger by nature, so the more I learned, the more I learned, like through talking to the staff here, by becoming friends with Bev, and then we found, sort of simpatico, we're kind of, and then we're asking each other, have you ever found this? So then we become the two diggers looking at these things to the point where, you feel you can just say, so Bev, have you ever seen this before? And then we'll be sending emails back and forth. So it really is become this research duo, just because it's been so many years and we share the interest in the joy of the find. That's a lot of it. When you have that moment when you nail it.
Yes, if I find something, the first person I email is Linda. You're not going to believe this. That would be the subject line, right? You're not going to believe this.
Or what do you think of this?
Yeah.
Or, I just found this. Do you think this is true? And just the fact we don't even think. It's like, does she have the time to deal with this right now? It's just like, fire it off. We both do it. And
midnight, 2 in the morning.
It's because I think that's been the part of the joy of it, and just the success of the two of us working and we also
sharing,
sharing it,
And that there's still so many stories to find and to
so
explore. And I mean, we'll talk later about some of the projects you're working on, but it's never ending. And I always thought that's sort of a question you've answered. But Bev, you where did you get your first? When did you want to first start researching McCrae? Now it's obvious because you were here at the museum, right? But that began. And Linda, you just answered that question, that it was that. Where do I find that information? And so from there,
I found it. But as much as you find, as we've both found, as much as you find that's real, you're also uncovering with every step, you're uncovering more that has to be challenged and has to be corrected.
So what has been your most significant piece of research? Would you say the highlight of all the years of research that you've done right now? Can you pick one? Is there any one in particular?
No one in particular. It's always moments, these flashes, and I think Bev would agree with this. It's like all of a sudden, I don't know, one time we were talking, hey, where is his will? Let's talk about the will, and then did some digging, and oh yeah, I found the will in Quebec. So then that was a midnight probably email. I found my will, it's in Quebec.
So this is John McCrae's
will.
Oh, wow.
So you see references to things, and then you suddenly go, where's the will? Well, they'll talk about the will. So then found the will.
So where did you find the reference? Was it just out in...
You just find these. It's just like, it's sort of hard to explain, but I think anyone watching this who does any kind of like genealogy research, you just know those certain moments ping.
Oh, that a word pops up.
Yeah.
And then one day it's there and the next day it's not, and then vice versa. You look one time and then the next time, oh my God, there it is, right?
Yep. And then you find a lot of our success depends on the willingness and the capability of other people who we contact to agree to help. Because yes, I can find Quebec, I can find the office, but can I find the person who will be interested enough to go and do that little, walk from this desk to that desk and find out if I'm right. And then it's fun because you can hear them get all excited. So I never knew that was here. Thanks for asking me to go. And then you end up with the correct information and they're happy. And I do know from working in libraries and museums, like for staff work, everything's about the numbers and how you dealt with the public and what questions came in and how many you were successful answering. And those stats, you think that all helps them on the other end because when it's not a private family you're dealing with an institution, that also encourages them and helps with funding or whatever else comes. My successes a lot of times have been being able to locate and then have good discussions or actually meet descendants of people, because as we know, we've lost that first one, and now we're moving to grandchildren of those people. And so for one instance is finding Alexis Helmer's fiance's granddaughter, who did not know that her grandmother had been the fiance of Alexis Helmer. And so she actually flew from North Carolina to here because I drove her here. She wanted to see what she could see about John McCrae. Now it's part of their family story. She shared photographs, how her grandmother did eventually marry during the First World War, and the family had not been told about this, but it was like 100%.
That was the family.
That was the family.
Wow.
And so she was very amenable to and getting excited about it. But on the other hand, you contact some other people who are descendants where let's say John McCrae was an usher at the wedding of their grandfather. Oh, there might be a picture of the wedding party. And you can find the grandchildren, but no one will answer. No one will answer an email. You can describe it short form, long form. They don't respond. Yeah. And that, as someone who's so enmeshed in this for so many years, I'm sort of thinking, well, if someone contacted my family and said, you have this picture someplace probably in a photo album of John McCrae, the fellow who wrote in Flanders Fields, I think I would be like, quick, like run through the house, quick, what do we have? Call up all the brothers and sisters. but it just falls flat.
Yeah.
And I have at least 10 cases of that where I know they know.
Yeah.
I know they have the things.
I know we've
not
always
family members of McCrae. I'm talking about these other extenuating, Owen Haig, Alexis Hummer,
like
how
degrees
far
of
can you follow it?
separation.
Yes. And I feel pressured. I'm getting older. The grandchildren are getting older. We know how people downsize and things get tossed away. You'd like to catch that.
Yeah. Bev, you've probably had that in your years here, like as a curator, the stories that came in. Was there any like top one like in your years at the museum here too, where there was like, that is just opens doors to the story?
Well, some of the things that came in were wrong, right?
Yeah, I guess true.
They were absolutely totally wrong, and they would come in and say, my aunt was engaged to John McCrae, and this is a trinket thing that was given to him, and it's got the JM initials, and I mean, what do you say? Well, you can't go right to their face and say liar, liar, it's on fire, right?
But the research is there.
But
Make sure
you have to do the research to make sure that it is true. And I mean, a lot of the times, a lot of the key moments that I found with doing research here at McCrae House for the exhibits. I mean, in a true real world, being the curator of McCrae House, if I could have spent 110% of my time doing that, there'd be lots more. But I had to balance many other jobs being the curator of Guelph museums, right? So a lot of times, and this is probably goes back to your first question, is now I have the time to spend totally on John McCrae and finding things. But it goes just what Linda said. I think one of a neat find that I found, and again, it's because things are being digitized more and more in collections and available online, is I was doing the Earl Grey trip, right? John McCrae in 1910, when it was the expedition doctor for Earl Grey's trip to the north. And I thought, okay, they stopped in Newfoundland, right? And I thought, there's got to be some event. They had to write about it in newspapers and that sort of thing. So I got onto a couple of archive sites, and sure enough, I found a photo of John McCrae in the galley of the Earl Grey ship, but he wasn't identified. Because they didn't know who he was. But I knew who all the people were in that picture, having done the research. So I was able to update that collection with the names.
I'm chuckling because we're at the point. We're at the point that we look at pictures, and you brought it to mind with this map of the Earl Grey trip, that there are pictures that were shot from across the landscape, and you can see the individuals walking. And you can just look at it and go, the back of his head.
You know his body type.
His limited wardrobe, the back, the shape of his head. And you have to chuckle. You think, we've been doing this job.
And his writing, his handwriting, right? Someone can, we have to be experts on John McCrae's handwriting. So someone says, oh, these are letters, I know.
The other thing that I've always been fascinated, when you mentioned the one time, I can't remember if it was either one, which one, but why don't we have his voice anywhere? Wouldn't that be amazing?
The problem with that it was okay to talk about it before now the technology is what it is now, because now I would have a hard time believing because someone could make it up.
You're right.
But it's always been right from the start, before the internet and all that. We kept thinking he was so pleased with how much money that poem brought into the war treasury. And he was pleased and wrote in his letters about, somebody wants to do such and such with it, and Susan wants to do such and such with it. And I think there is no way, if someone approached him on one of his trips into London and said, hey, for our fundraising drive, would you recite it, and then we'll just sell the recordings, because there were records and all that. And I just, he had to have done it. It appeals to his ego. It just like brings in more cash, which he was just so pleased at that. What was it, $4 million? And I just think it's out there. It's in someone's attic. Someone's attic.
The search still goes on for him.
I mean, I was in Fort Myers, Florida, at the Edison home and in the museum there. And I actually, I've never stopped thinking about John McCrae. I actually went up to a staff member to ask, do you have recordings? Do you have a list? Is there a list of recordings somewhere? Because I thought, okay, if Edison would have it, if it is out there. And unfortunately, they didn't have a list of the recordings. I said, well, this is what we're looking for if you ever come across it, and left my contact.
And it's that's pretty filmed recordings, because as the king and queen came, and this film of him, there's the still photos, and then you think maybe there's a film where it's a fundraising event and he stands up and he's reciting. So but now that we have the technology and someone could pretend to have a real thing, I think it sort of muddies it now. But you always hope. The Imperial War Museum doesn't have anything. They've already been checked.
Well, they got bombed out too, right? In the Second World War.
Yeah. So there's lots of photographs still. You still find, because of those little,
these little leads.
Found another one.
Oh, yeah. The other one was
exactly.
We knew that one of those handwritten copies, along with the Groblow description argument going on, that was at Carlton Noyes' house. So then you look up Carlton Noyes and you see the address, the 30 Francis Street in Cambridge. And so then I'm like, well, whatever. So I go through, and I happen to look on a day when that house was up for sale for $10 million out near Harvard. And all of a sudden you're looking and you think, oh, photos of the house, let's look. And then it's listed as no less Canadian attachment. It was the house of John Kenneth Galbraith, who had died, and his son was trying to sell the house, and it had been built for Carlton Noyes up the poem. So I go looking through the real estate pictures, and there's the bathroom, there's whatever, and then all of a sudden it's got the yard. Bang! There's one of the black and white McCrae photos. There's the wall. The two planters are still there, the huge brick wall. The only thing missing is the sundial that he's leaning on in the photograph. But the entire background from circa 1914 to 17 is there. Biggest life, not changed at all.
We'll show that picture. We will show that picture. We'll have to, we'll make sure it's on our talk.
You look at it and you just say, I can't believe I'm looking at, because we're always saying everything changes. Like, so much is changing. We're trying to find things before they change or are thrown out. But there it was. So I contacted the real estate agent. Poor man probably thought she has the $10 million to buy the house. And I said, this is the connection. And this is, again, he knew the poem. And the real estate agent, I said, could we possibly use those pictures? And he's like sending the pictures. Go ahead. And I'm like, middle of the night, sending them to Beth.
So it's those degrees of separation again. Yeah.
It's just fluke. So much is fluke. It was just, I happened to be nosy enough to look up an address in the real estate listing. And we found the yard.
But you know what you're looking for too, and that's sort of that. Yeah. That's amazing. Okay. Well, I'm gonna roll into, because we've been talking about some of those the myths, the stories that you've been searching out. So I'm thinking might not be rapid fire because we've got lots of stories to tell, but I wanted to play a McCrae myth word association. Okay. So it's going to help sort of illustrate the point of those stories. So I'm going to give you a name or an event or something related to McCrae, and you're going to either dispel the myth. Could be yes, no, but I have a feeling we've got a lot more to talk about than that. And then and then provide that bit of background. Okay, so I'm going to start off with McCrae's middle name.
No.
Okay, so he did not have a middle name.
Ever. No, never.
No. Okay.
No. And if he did, they'd say it was John Alexander McCrae, right? No.
So if you ever see that written.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you see that written, you know it's that their source is not reliable.
Like, move on.
Yeah.
The minute you see John Alexander McCrae was born in Guelph, Ontario, you just move on and do not because
Okay.
you don't. It's sort of an introduction to A Million Errors.
If he had a middle name, it would have been a name of a family, right? So it would have been John Eckford McCrae or John Simpson or John, all the family names, because that's what they did back then, right?
His
So,
father didn't
and Tom didn't
Tom
have a
didn't
middle.
have.
Okay,
But
so there's
Gilles, the sister, did. She's Mary Christy Gilles McRae. So maybe females, but not males.
Yeah, the
but-
grandfather didn't. The father
Yeah.
didn't.
okay.
So this is
There
a
we are.
clue to poor research when
Yeah.
you
Okay.
see John
Alexander McRae.
Okay, so no middle name. Perfect. Okay. Alexis Helmer, we talked about Alexis Helmer. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Because there is always, when referring to the poem in the writing of the poem, his name always comes up.
His best friend.
Yeah,
Take it away.
His student,
Yeah.
his former student.
yeah.
That you see. a
And
lot.
it's wonderful. I mean, it just tells us like a nicer story. But the truth being,
Well, the truth, he cannot be his student. The age difference, first of all, and
Helmer was in engineering.
and his civil engineer
Yeah.
degree from
Yeah.
McGill. It's because they're both at McGill, like a million other students would be at the same time as a million other professors. One's teaching in the medical school, and one is
Pathology.
studying. Yeah, and one is studying civil engineering. Like never the two shall meet. And with their age, it wasn't like you belong to the same club or he's your advisor or none of that. But consistently, you see, student of John McCrae.
so what would be his relationship then? What would you say? Like, it's not best friend. It's not.
It's being in the same outfit
In the brigade.
military.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're in the same brigade. There's an image of that we have of
Mhm.
McRae and him in the picture.
With a bunch of other young men and
So Alexis lost his life. Alexis
Yes.
Helmer lost his life in that battle,
Explosion.
in the explosion,
Shell
and that
yes,
was the catalyst to the writing of the poem.
one of them probably, but you go on and
Yeah,
talk about
it's one
Owen
of these.
Haig.
It's
Yeah.
it's an. Helmer was walking with Owen Haig,
Haig.
another
Okay.
soldier.
Yeah.
Owen Haig had grievous bodily damage done while Helmer was immediately killed, and Owen Haig died. I believe it was
Later that
later
night.
that night
Yeah.
or early the next morning
Yeah.
because the injuries were horrific. But people keep forgetting, like that's one of the things hard to pinpoint is when did people start fixating on this all had to do with Helmer?
Mhm.
And as if the two men weren't together at the time this horrible of this horrible shelling. And that one I still haven't figured out. It's like we associate the poem writing with the death of Helmer. Why? Because so many observers tell us so. Or they say he was at the funeral, he delivered the prayers over the
Because
grave.
the Padre was down the line doing it somewhere else, right?
So again, there's so much hearsay, and then how it gets picked up, similar to our internet repetition of errors. It's like the newspapers doing, because the newspapers at the time are all picking up each story and broadcasting that story all across North America. And so then then sometimes you'll even follow the same story, and you'll see they switch the little paragraph.
Mhm.
And you're like, well, that just threw another error into it. So I think it is clear that because of those deaths, that death on those days, that the poem was written the next day. It's just, then we go down another whole rabbit hole of these many claims.
Mhm.
All we could say, it was a pretty full space wherever he wrote. In Flanders Fields, there were so many claims to being right next to him when he wrote it.
Writing on his back.
Writing on his back.
So there have been. It's interesting the stories that come out of that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Alexis, not a best friend, but McCrae would have. They are in the
The
same.
way that
in
they're,
brigade.
brothers in arms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brothers in
Okay.
arms.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I wish Owen Haig was pulled into that too as well, because probably McCrae would have worked on Haig, right? Being the medical officer,
Mhm.
and yet because Helmer was blown to bits, but yeah,
In fact, when I
Okay.
go to schools, I now, I sort of, bad on me. I should have included Owen Haig from day one.
Mhm.
I've seen
I didn't
over a
do it
million
either.
kids in schools across the country since that first edition.
Yeah.
And I always had Helmer's picture. And I've gone in and I've actually changed my presentation, and I
Me
have
too.
photos of both both Owen Haig and Alexis Helmer.
Yeah.
And those are stories that I have to start upping my ante in the story of McCrae,
and
right?
I'm wondering too if it's only because maybe McCrae mentioned him in his diary, right? That if Soldier's death, Helmer was, whatever. So maybe that's because he was in his diary, they assumed.
Yeah, because he says
out of
with
context,
a picture of his girlfriend that had a hole through it, and I think that just
it catches people's and I mean it makes a better story, right?
It
too.
does.
Yeah, it's a special story. Next,
yes. What's next?
Alice McCrae. Okay, give a context. I'll get you to give a
You mean his
context.
girlfriend?
His girlfriend.
While he was at University of Toronto. No.
Okay.
Say it together.
Yeah. No. So this is when I was doing the letter project that I'm still doing it, but the transcription. I was so looking forward to reading those letters about him telling his mom about his girlfriend Alice, meeting her, because I think he would have in the letters home and all that sort of stuff. There is one letter about Alice McCrae. So he's never mentioned her before to his mom. All right. And in it says, I've sad, the gist of it is I've sad news today. We lost, and he's got our girlfriend, not my girlfriend, it's our girlfriend. So what it was William McCrae, and it's spelled MC capital big R-A-E. So it's a different
McCrae.
William was in McCrae's class at university. So, and William was the brother of Alice. So I'm sure the way McCrae met, because the McCrae brothers were always going to suppers and teas and invited all over the places, right? So I'm sure they went to this place. Plus the father was a doctor. So that would have interested both Tom and John. And so he would have met Alice at this house, but he wasn't her
the boyfriend.
The boyfriend or the girlfriend.
And if he was that close to her, he would have called her what the family called her, which was Janie.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
So the very fact you see, it's sort of like a signal, like Alexander. You see Alice and you go, anyone who would have been Alice's girlfriend would not have called her Alice.
Yeah, and that's even in the census. In the 1881 census, like in the 1871 when they were born, it was Alice. Alice Jane. And then by the time the 1881 census came around, it's A. Jane. All right. So.
And they called her Janie. And I have that from a descendant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who shared the one picture we have of her.
Yeah.
Again, a stranger enters the story and shares.
Well, they took the letter out of context. That's what happened. Okay. And so McCrae was a pallbearer, fair enough, and just transported the coffin to the train station, and he told his mom the couple of the hymns that they sang, and then he just took Tennyson's poem in memorandum and just inserted. He said, I'm inserting and thinking of my girlfriend, and the my is in quotation marks, okay, with the Alfred in the poem. Was it Alfred in the poem? Anyways, so then he just wrote out a couple things about that, and then the next day, on the top of the Monday letter, there's a thing, you're going to see an epistle, a strange epistle from me, and it was just my feelings, and please don't read it out loud to the family because I'm not sure how it would read out loud. And also too, it's amazing how Monday morning brings a person back to reality of life. End of story. End of Alice. Not mentioned again. Wow. There's no mention of grief. I'm feeling awful in the next letter that went home, and the next weeks of letters that went home.
So another story or an acquaintance that the storyline it's built to so that it makes that
another place in the time period. Yeah. They want that romance element. There has to be, when you think of the fiction of the time. It's like the girl in distress, and it's very, and he reads
the myth
novels.
Of McCrae.
I'm sure by her disposition, she was the light of the house. It's not, I know she was the light of the house. It's I'm sure she was, there wasn't that. And then 2 weeks before, he was at a YMCA social telling his mom about how he met all 10 girls at this social and got to walk some of them home. So if he had a girlfriend, what was he doing out at the YMCA social?
No.
We're getting to know McCrae way too much. Okay, next one.
Yep.
Okay, Queen's Own Rifle. Why do I say that? What's
Ready?
up there?
No.
Never. And you can verify on the extent of
Yes. So
work that was done on this one.
reading the letters, and I'm going, okay, there should be some mention about the Queen's Own Rifle, about going to drill, going to practice, needing help with getting his uniform pressed or a button sewed on. Poor Gilles, she had to do that all the
And
time.
And Queen's Own Rifle was?
That was Company K as part of the University of Toronto.
Okay.
So they were University of Toronto students. So no mention whatsoever. I went on to the Queen's Own Rifles website. They've got the nominal rolls digitized and available. And I went from 1884 to 1901 or 02 for however long he was there at UT. And there's no John McCrae mention. Linda contacts the curator for
Because there was a
confirmation.
whole page on the website about proudly, because they believed John McCrae was one of them. And so we had a nice back and forth, friendly. And I said, it appears he was never part of the Queen's Own Rifles. And then Bev had followed up with another Canadian historian.
Donald Graves,
Mhm.
who went to Ottawa and checked the nominal rolls there, and whatever else he checked up in Ottawa. And the three of us can.
And then we presented that to the Queen's Own Rifles, who then immediately took down that page.
Perfect.
Credit
Well done.
to them.
Yeah.
Because there was absolutely no proof, no evidence that he had been with them.
So that was a huge one.
Yeah, but the worst part, we all
It's
just
everywhere.
said it. Like, I said, I
Mhm.
probably published saying that he was a member of the Queen's Own Rifle, and I didn't question it, but
Because
and
McCrae's
that's why
story
we're doing
is
it now.
We're
yeah,
doing it
yeah.
now.
we're doing
So
it now. That's
perfect.
why we're doing
Okay.
it now. Yeah.
all right.
Someone doesn't have to do it 100 years from now. They can look for another problem.
So here's another one. Engagements.
Yes or no?
No. Well, there were lots of ladies that were engaged to John McCrae, but none of it.
Every book signing I did, someone would walk up and say, my great grandmother was engaged to him. And I wish I had money for every time somebody said that at a book launch or at a signing or something. And no, there's no.
Okay, but we haven't got the letters yet from the 1912, 13, 14 time period. So there is mention in Diane Graves' books, The Crown of Life, that he went to Scotland, and Nona Gwynn, who would have been his sister-in-law, sister to Amy, and Amy was married to Tom, right, his brother. There was references that she was the belle of the ball and all that sort of stuff. And then he writes back to his mom, and this is in Graves' book, that your son made a fool of himself and blah, blah, blah. And the trip fizzled out from there. And then Lady Osler writes, John McCrae got turned down by Nona. So whether he
That was
asked
a proposal,
Nona
yeah.
as a proposal, and there is a letter actually in the collection of McCrae House from Janet to Nona, Nona letting her know that she's getting engaged to Cecil Stewart, I think that was his name, and just kind of getting a blessing maybe.
Yeah, because she sort of said, I know things didn't necessarily work out the way you wanted them to work out.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a puzzling expression coming from the mother of the person who was turned down, but then she wishes her all the best.
Yeah.
So there's still an element of, there's enough of a turn that you say, did Nona kind of want him to propose, but then he did, and then she said no. It's sort of, that's another little one of those.
Yeah.
Put it aside, investigate it further, because
And those you'd love to be able to see those letters because those are the ones that Diane was able to
talk to
Yeah.
his mother about Nona, right? Like we don't know. So
but
that's
there's
a
no
little bit of-
definitive.
He
But
doesn't talk about girls, women much, except when he's sort of bragging like his dance card is full or he has no trouble.
Medal, 10 girls,
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. And then also too, there was a girl named Ethel Gibson, and the family still has those letters that he wrote to Ethel. But again, somebody dies and they split the collection, split in half. Don't do that, people. Don't split.
Yeah, keep it together.
Keep it together. Have one
Just makes it
person
so much easier for
yes,
researchers.
please.
Keep it together and call us.
Yeah. So the chatelaine is here in the collection, and there is a hand-drawn image of McCrae in the little notebook part as a and apparently that was a gift from John McCrae to this Ethel Gibson. And the letters that we have seen, the copies of the letters, he's the girlfriend front is pretty quiet right now, and if you can email me.
He would have said that.
Yeah, he said email me. johnmccrae@gmail.com.
Yes.
But no one would get him because they'd spell his name wrong.
Right. Undeliverable.
Well, that's another thing you have to search out too, is you got to play with the McCrae name
Constantly.
because sometimes they write it down wrong. So anyways, so this Ethel Gibson, we don't know her story yet either.
So there's more to that. So
Yes.
okay.
I have
Alrighty.
2 notebooks called McCrae Women. There's that many women who have made claims.
Oh,
And you can, every once in a while, I'll open one and say, oh, okay, I haven't looked at this since 2015. Okay, start looking again. Because as
dig
you say,
deeper and deeper.
digitize the masses come.
Yeah.
There are more and more every year. And so you just,
Yeah.
it's a loop.
To move
Right,
around.
Check.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I have brigade sergeant second in command. That's
Okay.
something new.
Well, that's what he was always referred to. So
And this is in France.
yeah, going off to the First World War. So brigade surgeon. So in 1898, the military abolished the term brigade surgeon. 1898. Okay, so 1914,
Yeah.
right? It's a
Fair
lot
difference,
of years
yeah.
in there. And there's no such position as second in command. Again, no such title
Yeah.
as second in command. So there was no way that McCrae was the brigade surgeon and second in command of that brigade with Morrison, right? There's just no way. He was the medical officer, and that's what the title was for medics going into.
I sometimes hear chief medical officer. Is it just medical officer? Okay.
And there's a letter here in the collection to Mrs. Nelson saying, I'm going over as a medical officer in his
Okay.
own handwriting, right? And there's no way either he could ever be second in command, because there would be military men, and that would be William Dodds, right? Dodds, D-O-D-D-S. He would be the one who would have, if anything, been the second in command if that title existed,
Okay.
because the military was his career. He had far more experience than McCrae. McCrae hadn't been involved in the military since 1900 when he came back from the South African War. So there's no way, and I mean, where this came from, it came from an unpublished manuscript that's in the collection in the museum that somebody wrote 60 years after the fact, and it's wrong.
Okay.
Totally
Perfect.
wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Good. Those
the
are the
other
types
thing
of.
that's become clear through Bev's work with the letters, I never realized just how much administrative duty his job was. Like he's going through the wards of their hospital there, but in France, but it's paperwork. Like here we are picturing him being
Yeah, surgeon.
doctor in action at all
Right
times,
in
and he wasn't.
No.
And that's part of what's getting to him is the amount of time he's spending not fighting when he wants to be a soldier, and he's also limited in the actual hands-on of being a doctor. The nurses are taking care of things. There are other doctors who take care of
His
things.
majors, yep.
And then there he is with the paper. And that's part of the go have the horse ride and clear your head. And it's clear he didn't want to be doing that.
And Val, I didn't get, how they say that he was, PSDD, he had that shell shocked, right? And that, I didn't get that from the letters, from the 1916, 17 letters. Either that or he's putting a brave face on for his mom.
Yeah, because that's what I've always been led to believe. Yeah, we've always said that,
he
right?
hated the administration.
And he gets
part.
angry. His anger shows, the frustration and anger shows because there's things like someone else gets a promotion or gets an award or something, and he's relating it to his mom. And sometimes I find it does help when you're a parent and you're reading this and these are letters to a mother, and you're reading them as a mom, and you're sort of, oh, he is so. I mean, it's just so. It sort of appeals in a way to the mom part of us. Is you're just like what you can see between the lines, and then it's
what he's not saying.
Change, like something will all of a sudden be uphill. More and more words are looped together. Page after page, there's like anger coming across in these.
So did his personality change by the end? Did you see that in his letter writing? No?
I think he's a bit bitter. It's hard to read what we know are his last months.
Yeah, the last month.
When you know he's going to be dead in a month, and he's writing a letter and home, and you're just like, oh, I wish I didn't know it. Like
you know the ending.
He's talking about Christmas. He's
hoping the next year they'll be
Christmas
together.
We'll be together, and you're just like, and all the soldiers would have been writing these letters, like, oh, I want to be home. I'll be home. We'll be together. You know, give your mom a kiss for me. All those daddy letters and postcards you read, and you think, there he is. He's doing it. He's writing that.
Trying to remain positive
But even if he would have been, there was a possibility of him going to be in charge of the number 1 Canadian General Hospital just temporarily, and he writes to his mom about that. But even if what happened was Burkitt had to leave, and so they needed someone to be in charge of number 3, and they moved up Dr. John Elder got moved up to the position. McCrae wouldn't have been happy in that position, and I think he kind of admits that because of the amount of paperwork that would have been involved, right? That he would have to do to run number 3.
And his health is poor because he's going in and out of more hospitals, more of those specialty hospitals they had for officers. You see more movement between. He's going to those for bronchitis or asthma.
Number 4.
So it's like one. There's a wearing down, and you can sense it when he's writing.
Sadly,
It's sad. It is sad.
So last one, I'm referring to the photos, and you already were mentioning how you found the spot, right? But there's another one too that we always had the label was wrong, like the information on it was wrong, and it's a photo of McCrae. Was he
reading?
Reading, sitting up, sitting with it,
his feet up on the railing,
and we had it wrong at the beginning, and you like a dog with a bone found the answer.
The date was wrong and the location was wrong.
You asked me about it, and I was thinking it's so long ago. Like everything's like 5 years to so long ago. I do remember that I was looking at the porch, and I thought that's distinctive. And then a picture came. It started with the poem that he had handwritten the copy for Elizabeth Packard that said on the letterhead from her cottage, Alderley, Kennebunkport, Maine. So as a child, every summer we would rent some different place for 1 week, and our family would go, and I thought, Kennebunkport, like we used to go to York. York is just south of Kennebunkport. And Kennebunkport, a lot of people know because that's where President Bush, the dad, his big estate is all security and stuff. But it was a place where the wealthy built their cottages. Now, when we talk cottages, they're like, 10 to 20 room shingle built 1900 buildings with full barns and pasture and all the rest of it. But a lot of those houses are still there. And so because it was Maine, I contacted the Kennebunkport Historical Society, and I asked about Alderley. Well, some woman who was there,
her day to work or volunteer, right?
Yep. Some volunteer, Joyce. Joyce says, I've done a lot of work on the history of that section. There's no house named Alderley, but there's a book about the shingle houses there. So then I found the book on the shingle houses, and I'm flipping the pages, and I see this house called Braemar. And I'm like, okay, that's matching. The porch looks like it's matching. So we write back and forth, and she says, hey, you want, I'll go over. I said, I'm coming up next summer. I'm going to go down there, and I'll drive the streets and see what I can find. And she says, well, it's just down the road. I can drive down there. Let me go look. So then I get this quick, like one of those emails. She says, well, there was some work being done in the house, and the fellow who was working in the house, he said I could go up, and she said, that picture you sent me, I think it's the same porch. So I'm thinking, good, get this narrowed down. And then the next summer I went down, and of course, what they don't show you is there's a big long lawn that goes down to the ocean, and it's all private property. And we're like parking the car, like, oh, we didn't bring binoculars. And so my husband said, drive up the driveway. I'm sure, like, if they get angry, they get angry. So we drive up, and there's a woman out on the porch. And I say, excuse me. And I had brought the copy of the picture.
That's perfect.
And I brought a copy of In Flanders Fields. And I said, I'm really sorry to bother you. Do you have a minute? And I said, she looks at the picture, and she just looked at her porch. And then I said, well, this is the fellow who wrote In Flanders Fields. And so help me, she stood on the porch and she started reciting In Flanders Fields. I'm like, okay, this is meant to be.
Yeah.
And then she's walking along the porch, and she's trying to, like, find the geography, the picture. And then she says, this is fantastic. She said, tell me more about him. So I'm saying, he drew and he sang, and she said, what kind of doctor? And I said, pathologist. And she says, that's what I am. Yeah.
That story.
That's what I am. And her husband was a sports injury doctor. So he wasn't there, and she says, I have a few minutes. Do you want to go through the house? No, don't ask me twice. So went in the house. They had white paint at the bottom, but basically the house was unchanged. And so as you walked the wide staircase up to the second floor, it was all the old wood with the high gloss shellac and everything. All these doors onto a central fireplace unit with the angle nook and the whole thing. Massive place. And then she said, well, notice the bedroom doors. She said, the bedroom doors all go, the family doors all have an interconnected door between each room so that they could open all the doors and everyone could just, like, because it faces the breeze of the ocean. Clear view to the Atlantic. She says, but this room over here, you go around the corner, and there's a room with no adjoining doors, has room for, like, one small bed, still has the marble sink for the person in that room to use. And she said, this was the guest room.
So
when the Packards were living there, they had all that front interconnected family space. That was where McCrae would have stayed.
Huh.
That was the guest room, because it's off on a little side, total private to the guest. So it was just amazing. And then she said, oh, well, maybe you know about this. And she takes me to the corner of the porch, because now there's some glass to protect, but where his feet are up on the rail, the rail's still there. And she takes me over and she says, we left this on the wall here, but we didn't know what it was. And it was sort of a weird looking hook. And I said, look at the picture. And there's a hammock in the back of the ground of the picture with the children on it. And it's hanging from that exact spot. So I said, well, that would be where the hammock in the picture. So I made a photocopy of the picture. I mean, she was thrilled. And then when that other picture with McCrae with the small child came, I had that one too. And you just walk to their front door, and there's the exact porch with the exact hall window to the upper stairs with the exact, none of the molding has been changed. So
he was there.
I could figure, 1903, he was there. It wasn't in the 1800s. He went in September, matched. The house was called Augerly at first, then changed to Braemar when the Packards moved out. And Elizabeth Packard had super crush on him. She had worked as a nurse when he was at the Garrett Hospital in Maryland. And she had this all blew up. This whole story blew up to the point where I found the granddaughter of Elizabeth Packard's captain of her little yacht that she had in Maine at another location. And she said, oh, yeah, Miss Packard, she dressed like this. She remembered her. She remembered being out on this little boat. And she also remembered that when you walked into Miss Packard's other main house, In Flanders Fields was on the wall next to the front door. There were pictures of John McCrae in the bedroom, in the living room, and on the wall in the hall. And she could remember
all of that.
So it was just like super crush. And you keep finding these super crushes from these women who had worked with him. And he used to go and have holiday time, free room and board, I'm sure, at the Packards. cottage, and
Wow.
the house is still there
Wow.
Yeah. So
Amazing story.
there's the photos of him riding the horse.
Yes.
with her.
And then there's the book that has the handwritten poems inside that was donated to the museum. So
And
that's
That's
her
all the
book.
her
connections.
book. Yeah. So
Okay.
there's actually, she's cut out pages. It's the McPhail
Yes.
book. So she cut out pages from it, and he must have handwritten some poems for her
Yeah.
on letterhead for the cottage.
Mistakes in
Cottage.
each one.
Yeah.
He never remembered his own poems correctly.
Yeah. So he put, and that's inside the book.
Okay.
Handwritten.
Yeah.
So there's the
on
full
that piece of
story.
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, those are exciting things. I always think of it from a woman's perspective too. I mean, you go at the research in a different way, I think, because you're looking at the social side, like looking at
It's more
him
the
as a
social side.
yeah, like him as a what was he like? All those little connections, like tracing out those other stories. So that brings us to the end of our rapid fire sort of session about our McCrae myths debunked. I think that gives a good understanding of the types of work that and the challenges that come with doing research, and especially on a man like McCrae, a famous figure like that, because there's many stories to be told and many stories that are not told or need to be told even beyond what we tell, essentially. And we've had long conversations about that. We could probably fill up a couple of sessions of all the stories that we've had. So it leads me to think about now, you're still working on stuff. Like, what are your current projects? Who wants to start?
All
Beth.
right. So I started the World War letters. So they're already transcribed. So now what I'm doing is I'm going back to them and now filling in the research gaps and that sort of thing and creating the footnotes. And I can tell you that it's slow going at the beginning because I'm setting the stage, right?
Yeah,
So there's a whole bunch of things and people I have to research. So I think that very first letter has 18
Names? Different
footnotes.
names? Oh,
Well,
my-
18 footnotes
okay.
about things. So then what will happen is,
So what was the date of that letter?
it would be, what was it?
You haven't done
March.
chronological.
Yeah, that was part of the problem, wasn't it, Linda? I probably should have done it all chronological. And I found too that sometimes some of the letters are just so hard to read because they're done in pencil and we're working off a microfilm, right? So it's quite difficult. So there are some letters that we'll have to see in real life.
And where are they kept now?
Library and archives up in Ottawa. The
Okay.
family donated all the letters there. So then what will happen is then I will attach all those letters in an email to Linda, probably late at night, and she'll get it late at night and start working on them late at night.
Help myself.
And then Linda will go over and she will add her own little research notes. She'll question some of my research notes, which is perfect. And then probably fill in a couple of words that I couldn't get.
Yeah, sometimes I
Another
look at
eye.
system,
Yeah, another set of
I
eyes.
see the word.
Yeah. So that's where we're at with the project is we've kind of done the very first initial go through, except for the Boer War
Okay.
letters, which I'm starting to work on again. And
How many letters altogether?
this one he wrote a lot because there was a lot of times he was just sitting.
He tried to write once a week.
Yeah,
That's all from home.
But these ones, when he was just sitting guarding something, he would write twice, three. Like there,
Wow.
I
And
think I
to
counted
everybody?
up.
To just mom? Or
Well, there's a variety. They go to Mum and Gilles mainly,
Okay.
and to Pater, father, David McCrae,
just,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
So those were the three. We don't have the ones that he wrote to Tom, but I think he assumed that what would happen is the letters then would be sent to somebody else to read and that sort of thing, or they were read out loud. So we've done the first sort of go through. So the next set is the two of us have to sit down and look at these letters and fine tune now and say, okay, we need more research on this. We need more research on that. And again, I started it. 5 years,
I know,
4
I was
years.
thinking
So
of
we'll
driving
probably
up
have to
here.
go back again and
Because of
relook
all the
at some
new
of
things, because
research.
you
I
found
know,
some of that
I know.
information and now it makes sense.
Yeah.
When you
Yes.
see, okay.
And then there's always the talk of a possible book, right?
That'd be
That-
amazing.
Well, just because everything is so transient, and you just like you want to nail it down, and the best way to nail it down is to have it on a hard copy. Like I'm thinking, even when we get to the final go throughs, we should have a hard copy so we can mark and like move pages and
Oh, yeah, we'll have
which
to
will be
have
work way. I think we'll catch more on that level of hard copy that we can't catch on screen because we're always working double screens with his original and yeah, eyes
you know,
kind
and you know the glasses, right? The 3 levels, and it's you're like this right up.
Oh, to be 20 again.
Yeah, that would be something. But yeah, so that's what my plan is.
Okay.
I kind of in COVID, I kind of just dropped the whole thing, and I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's when life,
Yeah.
And I
family
probably-
life kind of came.
So how
Probably
many more letters
should.
are there left?
Oh well, there's the collection of the Boer War, and there's probably about 65 letters in that year, in that one
Okay,
year.
that's a
But you've
fair
done,
glimpse.
there's
Yeah.
been hundreds.
Oh, there's been hundreds of letters, but we don't have it. Like I said, so we've got the very early, like the
You did
18
his university.
Yeah,
years,
his
right?
university
You've done
years are
those.
done,
That
yeah.
was a lot of new information.
Yeah.
How many letters were there?
Oh, I don't
Every
know.
week for 4 years.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
you've done them all?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
they're all
So
transcribed.
now it's the Boer War.
Yep. The 1901 to 1905, which we have, are very poorly. They're really hard to read.
Mm.
They're like almost
Will you
indecipherable.
be able to?
I think maybe if we see the originals,
but
I
even
don't
then,
So it's getting it
or
to see.
or if they digitize them up at in Ottawa,
Mhm.
rather than because we're working off a microfilm,
Oh yeah,
right?
'cause
So the
digitizing
poor
it can blow
microfilm.
you.
Yeah,
quality.
and microfilm quality from the 1980s.
70s or
Well, yeah,
it's
80s
very
maybe.
poor.
Yeah. And
So would
whether the person operator looked at what they were microfilming at sometimes. So we're missing, so I would say we're missing from 1901 to 1915.
A lot of
And I
Yeah,
would
so-
see 1910.
Yeah, so there's all these.
We have a lot of clue things we want to look up.
Yeah,
for
so we need
1910.
McCrae as the adult. So we've got McCrae as the student. We don't have McCrae as the adult, and then we've got him as the medical officer in the world. So we've got 16 and 17.
Right up till he dies.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've
Yeah,
seen that
that-
personality change over the
That's
years.
December.
You've seen that.
There's a maturity, like you can definitely see a maturing
Yeah.
young man from the U of T days. That's fun, and you're going to be talking about more about that later. But yeah, you see the growth, but it's just when we started going through the war years, so much was in sequence that more and more that black cloud would start rising, and you'd say, we're turning the page into 1917 and everything that's changing, and like he's not going to have another summer, he's not going to have
Yeah.
another this,
Yeah.
and you really start. Your brain is going that way while
Yeah.
you're reading it. So by the time you get to the Christmas letter, it's like, ooh.
Yeah. And then in his university, it's like the world is my oyster type of thing.
Yeah.
And he felt that way.
Yeah, and then and probably one of the biggest thing he dealt with all through his university time was his asthma, right?
Mhm.
So again, here's
This is another. Yes,
myth.
that's another. We talked about that.
So,
Oh, good. Yeah.
so we found this one out. So like I'm reading through the letters and I'm going, wait a minute, any of the asthma attacks he did have in later years, they would only last a day or two or at the most a week, right? So why was he off for a whole year?
Mhm.
So what happened was he had to take the year off school, and this just doesn't make sense. So now that things are digitized in the University of Toronto, thank you, University of Toronto,
Yes, varsity.
have digitized all their course calendars and their varsities, and they're searchable. So you just search McCrae, and you have to do
You
different.
still have to read a lot.
Yeah. And there it is. There it is. John McCrae had typhoid.
Wow.
So he did not leave U of T because of asthma and because of the smoke in the air in
It
Toronto.
was typhoid, and
It
that's
was
brand new.
typhoid.
Like, that was a.
Yes.
Little tiny couple of sentences
Yeah.
just in the announcement.
Saying-
So he's back with us
Yeah.
after being away.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
we're wishing him well. There were a couple actual things. So then that's when I guess they must have decided that once he recovered at probably towards the end of the like November or whatever, he probably was recovered at that point in time, but thought there was no sense going back for the year. So that's when he got a job as assistant resident, a mathematics teacher and house resident at OAC,
Okay.
Ontario Agricultural College. And that's
So a
how
new
he
bit of
ended up
information
there
right there.
teaching. And
Okay.
even then in March, he had diphtheria. There was a little thing in the
Yeah.
varsity that said he's recovering from diphtheria And but then
Okay.
so it was decided that he would then graduate with the 1893 class instead of the 1892 class.
So now there are
Perfect.
definite answers to that.
Yeah,
Where
Perfect.
they were before.
so that's what I'm working on is. And I'm sure there'll be new discoveries in that batch of
Well, it seems like
letters.
because you're saying everything is opening up, right? You can go onto the internet and press some buttons or search deeper in,
More
and it's there.
more
So,
digitized
Yeah.
and online.
And then it's so nice because you know you're working primary source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like photo facsimile. There's no questions. And,
Yeah.
and by now we've learned like when you see something, you go, don't even bother.
Mhm.
yeah,
So at least we can pare down
yeah.
the specifics.
So then you guys you're working both together on projects, but Linda, you have some other things that you have on the go
In the
too.
pandemic, what you're grateful for. So I had already started while waiting early in the
Yeah.
night. If they came at midnight, I was doing it. Because I couldn't resist it. And I would just stay up all night waiting to read this. But it was one of those times where you thought, I was looking at the McPhail 1919, and he's got the 20-odd poems in there, and everyone for 100 years has treated it as this is it. Like, this is absolutely his opus. And just one day I started thinking, how can this be all... let's go. I started by going through the varsities. I contacted his high school, any place I could find any reference to any those pen and pencil club notes, like what had he written for that? And then I thought, there's no place you can go and track this very short, rather short because of his shorter life, writing career, just as a writer. What was he producing? So 80,000 words later, he did not write just those poems that are in
The 28
McPhail,
right?
Yeah,
28
it does.
poems.
Yes.
I'm up over 40 poems.
Wow, 40?
Yeah. I also have collected essays he wrote, some are copies of pamphlets that were printed, but then did the extra digging to find ones where newspapers would say, Dr. McCrae is going to give a lecture on, and then they'd give a title. So then I've tracked back to try to find those. So it ends up, you end up with this body of work that's and simultaneously, plus and chronologically, he's going out of poetry into travel writing, into historical biography writing, into autopsy reports, into scientific, let me throw another poem in here. And it just shows like that when that pathologist in Maine said to me, pathologists tend to be, of all doctors, the ones that move in and out of the arts. It's like, yes, he's the embodiment of that, in a way, a Renaissance man. Because I found his travel pieces wonderful. I mean, he can be in Italy and have you smell the fragrance of the flowers in the sunshine on a wall. He's that good a writer. And then he's also doing this scientific writing where you're just like, like you'd have to be a doctor to, lab person know what he's saying. And then he's interested in the history of medicine. So it'll be about some doctor from the 1500s or the 1700s. And it just keeps moving until the last piece is the Anxious Dead. But in between, I've been able, and this was all because we'd been working on this handwriting like daily practically, I ended up discovering something.
Wow.
So
truly prolific.
he was,
More out there? Do you think there's more out there?
There's still like 5 different things I know he gave, but I cannot locate in any way. And I've tried for 2 years on that. So I'm at the point where now write an essay that sort of is the preface to it, and then put as this writing changes. But I think it would be helpful to have all his known, what can be found, his writing, and then someone can riff off of that 50 years from now when more comes up or more is found in an attic or something. But just, Bev feels the same way. It's just, we have to get this stuff down now. Both for our personal journeys and for whatever a scholar wants to do in the future. And I'm finding it's not just scholarship. Like, if you read his writing, it would be a read, just a fun read, an enjoyable read. It's not like, oh, it's academic. It's like, no, like, travel with him on some of these essays, or read what they believed was the biography of a useful doctor in the old days, or his reports. There's an article about horses from the South African War. So he's in it. He's a master of many topics, and we know from his letters he knows he is, and that assuredness comes through in his writing, and it makes it very engaging. Like, he writes about working at the hospital. You're everywhere. You're all around the world with his writing. So, and I think it would be nice for people to be able to enjoy that. It's nothing kids are going to read. It's like definitely a good adult. Pull up your, make your mug of coffee, get your bottle of wine, sit in the chair, and just like open the book and read something else he wrote. Because it's not all about In Flanders Fields. Yeah. And that's what's happened. It's all about In Flanders Fields.
Yeah. And another thing I've done, Val, is he was an incredible reader. Oh my goodness. Books that
you were saying you've been keeping track of that.
And so I've got along the side, I've got my little chart, right, where I'm putting in the letter and what he's read and what he's commented about the book that he's read, because he's always got a comment about the book that he's read. And so somewhere down the line, somebody could do a McCrae book club, and you'd actually have McCrae's comments and what he thought of the book in that book club.
That's good.
But he read, like, it's just incredible. Like, it's
book
hard
club.
to explain.
Writing that down.
Yeah.
He's reading things new.
Yeah, at the time, right?
Yeah.
So
when Treasure Island comes out,
contemporary novels of his time.
Reading it.
Something's out in 1895. We would find 1895 or 6. He's reading it.
And just constantly. And if anybody could do anything for him, it would be sending him books and novels.
And the books that were on the shelf in the officers' quarters.
Yeah.
He would be in there pulling books off of there. And his mom, it's like he and Janet had their own little book club. Yeah. Because you can tell from what he's saying, she had written what she thought of something.
Yeah, because you don't see that. That's right.
We don't see the other. Yeah, we don't see her letters. Wouldn't that make such a wonderful? And we wish we would have had Tom's letters too. So, but we haven't yet found.
We would like to know what happened to all Tom's belongings.
Correspondence.
He died. Yeah. And then his wife died. Yeah. And they had no children. And so everything was down
go in the garbage? Like, I don't know. But anyways, So like Carla, and he loved Shakespeare. I think one of the best gifts someone gave him, I think it was either Gilles or his father, sent him a volume of Shakespeare works. And he loved Hamlet.
But he never has correct quotes.
Yeah.
Every time he puts a quote, we know, go look up the actual quote from the Bible, from famous poems of the past. And there's always like a word off or the wrong.
But he's doing it from memory, right? He's doing it from memory. How much he could remember, and maybe he was not a speed reader where he can photographic memory, because I don't think he would read volumes of Carlyle and like all the big classics names and stuff like that.
Still be able to pull.
Yeah, and then at the same time, he's got to be reading all his medical stuff that he needs to prepare for his exams and
the
all
office
that.
work during the war.
Yeah. So that was quite fascinating.
And songs. He loved hymns.
Oh, and he loved singing. Singing was huge for him.
I'd like to hear him sing.
Yeah.
I wonder what his speaking voice was like. Because what did he sing?
Well, he was a second bass. Second bass in the Glee Club.
Voice then? So
deep voice.
Deep voice maybe, or maybe a tenor voice would be higher.
For singing.
Yeah.
No, I guess I don't know. Like when you sing a certain part,
but
your speaking voice totally different.
No, when I know a lot of bass people and they talk
normal.
No,
normal.
It's just what your range is, right?
Yeah. See, we want that tape. We want that.
Exactly. It comes right back around to that. So I'm getting from him. It's almost like it's an intimate relationship with his writing. It seems like,
Oh,
or the
good. I'm glad
things
you
that,
said writing.
but it seems like there's more to learn. We think we know. We think we have it down pat. The storyline.
I don't think he would have
but-
selected us for girlfriends. No, we wouldn't have been on that list.
So there's my final question is, so where do you go from here, and what are your plans? But it sounds like more research, more letters have to be,
letters, yeah.
Possibly books. I know there's different, wouldn't that be nice?
I would like to find a publisher.
Yeah.
Because these stories, like I say, it's all input ready to go. I do the essay, and you're just afraid that none of it will see the light, and then my family will be
Into the garbage.
in the garbage. You go, oh, no. And right now, I'll just tantalize you. I'm waiting to hear back from a crematorium in Los Angeles any day now to hear if someone who claimed to be with McCrae when he wrote In Flanders Fields, whether his ashes have been unclaimed in that crematorium since 1950. So any day now, I rush to the computer.
So there's more stories right there.
Yeah.
That's another whole talk we can do.
Another whole story
Yeah.
no one knows about yet.
Yeah,
So,
Linda's got some great stories. She's takes these letters and then follows the stories for other people that are mentioned in the letters, and has come up with some amazing.
So more talks to
research
come
and
for
things.
sure with all of that information.
Yes, for sure.
and if anyone in your audience has any of these letters or anything we've mentioned, please loan them, and we will gladly transcribe so that you know what they say, and it will add to this
Might even
mammoth
put
project.
that puzzle piece in that was needed. That's been
Yeah.
missing.
If you have a recording and you're not making one yourself, search those addicts.
yeah, which is, wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah.
That's how things happen.
That's
It's magic. It really is magic.
Wow, I never want to, I really don't want to stop our conversation because, one story leads to another, and we do that. The three of us do that. The two of you I know do that. But that doesn't end here. Of course, it doesn't ever end here. And we'll be doing that with the more information that we have to tell in this house. It's going to add to the storyline.
It's
it's
really
pretty
nice being in that.
Yeah, so I
place
thought it had to
do
be
this.
here, right?
Mhm.
It inspires us. It makes me look around at the pictures and questions that we might have that we need to follow up on, and then maybe you already have the answers on, but we can use that in our interpretation. So
We've had fun.
Yeah, we won't take a marker and stroke
Yeah.
on the labels.
I think we're almost up to date. I think we've got everything right up to date.
Well, there's
for the
the
most part.
Alderley letter right behind you, the Alderley copy with Kenny Bunkport.
Yeah.
There
It's
it is.
right
there.
over
there.
So people can, when they visit the museum, which I hope they all do,
Yeah.
they can
They
actually
can put
see
those-
what
connect those dots.
inspired that bit of research.
Perfect.
It's right there.
Perfect. Well, thank you, my friends.
Thank you.
This has
Thank
been
you.
a really special moment to share with you guys. So I really appreciate
I'll let
this.
you know if I
Thank
get
you.
those cremation results.
Yeah. Okay. That's even better. Yeah. And on behalf of the Guelph Museums, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.